Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm registered dietitian Dominic Morrow, and I hope this video, the first in a series of 3, helps you on your journey to recapture your health. I plan on convincing you that your best chance to live a long-lasting, full-functioning life of optimal health lies in transitioning to a lifestyle that includes a whole food plant-based diet and reasonable exercise. But before I begin my quest, there are 2 important disclaimers that I need to share. The information provided is designed for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for informed medical advice or care. You should not use this information to diagnose or treat any health problems or illnesses without consulting your family doctor. So please consult a doctor with any questions or concerns you might have. And dietary change is powerful medicine. If you are currently under a physician's care and/or are on prescription medications, notify your physician on your plans to follow a whole food plant-based diet. Very often, certain prescription medications can be reduced or even eliminated. This is particularly important if you are on blood pressure and diabetes medications. Okay, so without further ado, it's time we look to see what all the commotion is about in regards to whole food plant-based diets. And the best place to start is with the definition. A whole food plant-based diet is based on whole or minimally processed plants, and primarily fruits, vegetables, whole grains, tubers, and legumes. Common tubers are potatoes and sweet potatoes, and legumes are beans, peas, and lentils. A whole food plant-based diet excludes or minimizes animal-based foods such as meat, poultry, fish, dairy, and eggs, as well as refined foods like refined flours, refined sugar, and oil. A whole food plant-based diet is not necessarily a vegan diet. A dietary vegan is someone that excludes meat, eggs, dairy products, and all other animal-derived ingredients. The term vegan tells you what a person doesn't eat. It doesn't tell you anything about what he or she eats. A vegan can live on lollipops, French fries, and soda. There are many unhealthy junk food vegans in the world. As mentioned earlier, the term whole food plant-based emphasizes the foods that should dominate the diet: fruits, veggies, whole grains, tubers, and legumes. It's very clear about the types of foods that are eaten on a whole food plant-based diet. It also excludes or minimizes meat, fish, poultry, dairy, and eggs, as well as bleached flour, refined sugar, and oil. I encourage people to try to be as plant-based as possible. If you're looking for the most benefit, I wouldn't recommend eating more than 10% of your calories from animal foods. If you follow a whole food plant-based diet, but eat meat, fish, or dairy occasionally, you're not a vegan, and that's okay. So why the term vegan is an incomplete or incorrect description of a whole food plant-based diet? Although I'm 100% plant-based and I'm a dietary vegan, I don't like to describe my diet as vegan because it's a very incomplete description of how I eat. My neighbor may be a junk food vegan living on potato chips, cola, and vegan cheese. And although we both meet the definition of vegan, my diet is much healthier than hers. And so your diet will be much healthier than hers too if you transition to a whole food plant-based diet, even if you include the occasional animal product. It would actually be incorrect to call you a vegan. So if you recommend our Recapture Your Health series of videos to a friend, please don't tell them the videos are about vegan diets. The goal of the Plantastic Life 3-part video series is to show that a whole food plant-based diet is the diet meant for human beings because it gives humans the best chance to live long, healthy, and happy lives. And also to explain Jeff Novick's calorie density approach to whole food plant-based eating. Now, the food we eat has a major impact on our health and quality of life. This by no means is a new idea. At around 450 BC, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." Very few MDs in the 21st century heed this advice. In much more recent times, Thomas Edison stated, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest her or his patients in the care of the human frame, in a proper diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." What a concept! Here's a quote from Simon Capewell, a professor of clinical epidemiology at the University of Liverpool. He said poor diet causes more diseases than physical inactivity plus smoking plus alcohol combined. Think about that statement. Your health status has more to do with your knife and fork than anything else. I think we can agree that cigarette smoking, a sedentary lifestyle, and alcohol abuse are all unhealthy habits. And I am not suggesting that as you transition to a whole food plant-based diet, that you begin sitting on the couch all day smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. The fact that these behaviors are unhealthy makes Dr. Capewell's statement that much more powerful. If you exercise on a regular basis, don't smoke, and don't abuse alcohol, but your diet stinks, you are still at risk of developing the chronic diseases that unnecessarily afflict so many Americans. According to a Harvard School of Public Health news release from April 2014, by the year 2020, poor diet will likely play a role in about 75% of all deaths from chronic diseases, such as cancer, heart disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. The next few slides show populations of people that back up Dr. Capewell's assertion about the power of diet. I've decided on 4 populations, but I could have used more to make my point. The first are the Hunza. They live in a fertile valley in the north of Pakistan that supports agriculture and is isolated from industry. Okinawans live on the island of Okinawa in Japan. They have more people over 100 years old per 100,000 population than anywhere else in the world. Next are the Abkhazia. They live in the Caucasus Mountains in southern Russia. And finally, the Vilcabamba Indians. They live in an elevated valley in southern Ecuador. 4 genetically different populations from different regions of the world. Let's see, what could they have in common? Well, what do the Hunza eat? Mostly raw plants and lots of fruits and whole grains. What about the Okinawans? Veggies, fruits, and grains make up 72% of the diet. Soy and seaweed, 14%. 11% of their diet is made up of fish, and 3% is made up of meat, poultry, and eggs. They rarely, if ever, eat dairy, and their bones don't crumble as they age. For strong bones, dairy is not necessary. What do the Abkhazia eat? Very fresh fruits and veggies, whole grains and nuts. And what about the Vilcabamba Indians? Fruits and veggies, whole grains, seeds, and nuts. None of these populations follow a vegan diet, as they do consume some animal foods in very small amounts. But they each follow their own version of a whole food plant-based diet. John Robbins, author of Healthy at 100, concludes that the diet and lifestyle of these cultures make them immune to the top killers in the West. These diseases include heart disease, cancer, stroke, chronic pulmonary disease, pneumonia, liver disease, suicide, and Alzheimer's disease. What's even more amazing is how physically active people from these cultures remain well into their 90s. These folks show that severe physical and mental limitations are not inevitable consequences of aging. Living into your 90s does not have to be lived in a state of incapacity. If you truly want to maintain or reclaim your health and vitality, you should do your best to eat diets dominated by whole plant foods. This is the best chance to live a long and healthy life. Highly creditable men and women of science have come to this conclusion, and I'd like to start with a great physician from the 20th century named Denis Burkitt. Early in his career, Dr. Burkitt discovered that one of the most common cancers in African children was due to a viral infection, the Epstein-Barr virus. In recognition of this finding, this fatal condition became known as Burkitt's lymphoma. Effective chemotherapies followed his discovery. His second major contribution came later in his career. Dr. Burkitt observed that diseases widespread in Western countries are absent in the Third World. Dr. Burkitt was head of the Ministries of Health in Uganda for 17 years, taking care of 10 million people in Uganda, Africa. He saw no obesity, 1 gallstone, no deep vein thrombosis, no pulmonary embolism, no type 2 diabetes, no colon cancer, and no hemorrhoids in 17 years. And he actually saw only one case of heart disease or coronary artery disease. And that case was not an African. It was actually an English judge who recently moved from London to Uganda. Dr. Burkitt concluded that Ugandans were protected by their high-fiber diet. They lived on plants, whole, minimally processed plants. He wrote an internationally best-selling book called Don't Forget Fiber in Your Diet to help avoid many of our commonest diseases. And this was published in 1979. An enormous body of scientific research has validated Dr. Burkitt's ideas, and the list of dietary diseases has expanded to include osteoporosis, breast and prostate cancers, and autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and multiple sclerosis. Dr. Burkitt was instrumental in getting cereal and bread manufacturers to sell whole grain products. They were not as easily available as they are today. He met with executives of the biggest companies and convinced them on the benefit to public health. That is the kind of high esteem in which Dr. Burkitt was held. He was truly a pioneer in lifestyle medicine. Here are 3 of my favorite quotes from Dr. Burkitt. Western diets are so low on bulk and so dense in calories that our intestines just don't pass enough volume to remain healthy. America is a constipated nation. If you pass small stools, you have to have large hospitals. In the frying pan you should give to your enemy. Food should not be prepared in fat. Our bodies are adapted to a Stone Age diet of roots and vegetables. Next in our line of whole food plant-based pioneers is Nathan Pritikin. Nathan Pritikin was diagnosed with near-fatal coronary artery disease in his early 40s. His highest cholesterol was reported to be 280 milligrams per deciliter. At age 43, he was diagnosed with a lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. Research to save his own life led him to develop a low-fat, low-cholesterol, high-carbohydrate diet to treat epidemic Western illnesses. He was able to lower his own cholesterol to below 150 milligrams per deciliter and relieve all his symptoms and signs of heart disease. His lymphoma went into remission for 27 years. His diet was a whole food plant-based diet that allowed for very small amounts of skim milk, lean beef, chicken, and fish. It was also lower in salt, and his program emphasized strenuous exercise. He spent his early life as an engineer and inventor, patenting chemical and electrical products for corporations like Bendix and Honeywell. He never had any formal medical training, but during his career he published several national best-selling books, and his team of physicians and researchers published over 100 scientific papers in some of the world's most respected peer-reviewed medical journals. He founded his longevity center in Santa Barbara in 1974 and then moved it to Santa Monica in 1978. Thousands of people attending his live-in programs saw their heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, and obesity reverse almost overnight. A variant of the original Pritikin program is still operating in Florida. Unfortunately, Mr. Pritikin suffered a recurrence of his lymphoma in 1985. His last few months of suffering from this disease and the disease's treatments caused him to take his own life at age 69 in 1985. After his death, a thorough autopsy was performed and the results were published in the New England Journal of Medicine. His heart was remarkably free of disease and the coronary arteries were completely open, proving one last time that he was right. Both Nathan Pritikin and Dr. Burkitt were great inspirations to our next whole food plant-based medical doctor. Dr. John McDougall is a physician who refers to Nathan Pritikin and Dr. Burkitt as giants based on their work establishing the connection between food and disease. I would argue that Dr. McDougall has reached their heights. He's written and spoken about the effects of nutrition and disease for over 30 years. His first job as a physician was on a sugar plantation in Hawaii. He was the only physician for the Filipino, Japanese, and Chinese plantation workers. He found that his older patients were thin and free of chronic disease. However, their children and grandchildren became fat and sick. Yet they were all doing the same work. What was different about them? It became clear to Dr. McDougall it was the food. He subsequently created the McDougall program, which is based on the assumption that ideal weight and optimal health can be achieved and maintained if we eat a diet based on whole and minimally processed, low-fat plant foods. Dr. McDougall with his wife, Mary, have run this highly successful live-in program for more than 18 years. Dr. McDougall's version is a high-starch, low-fat, whole food plant-based diet. He has helped thousands of people reverse serious illness such as heart disease without drugs. His latest book is The Starch Solution, and he says that it will be his last. The list here is by no means an exhaustive list of foods that are recommended by Dr. McDougall, but it gives you an idea that unrefined starches are strongly encouraged. Intact whole grains, whole grain breads, cereals and pastas, potatoes, sweet potatoes and corn, and many types of beans. Dr. McDougall does allow condiments, even some high-sodium condiments like soy sauce. He's most interested in helping the greatest number of his patients successfully transition to his starch-based diet, and adding a little bit of salt and sugar to some meals is allowed if it is necessary to get patients to eat healthy food. How do you make Dr. McDougall angry? Call him a practitioner of alternative medicine. He says he treats diseases caused by diet with diet. Diet is the appropriate conventional treatment for chronic diseases. If a patient fails at the diet or refuses to change his or her diet, then Dr. McDougall will use drugs and/or procedures as alternative treatments. And that's the way it should be when treating chronic diseases. All the information you need to start on the McDougall program is provided free of charge at www.drmcdougall.com. He provides a free 10-day meal plan to try. His website is full of recipes, articles, and many written and video testimonials from people who credit him for giving them their lives back. I encourage you to check it out. You might be familiar with this next lifestyle medical doctor. Dean Ornish is the physician, president, and founder of the Preventive Medicine Research Institute in Sausalito, California. He's the clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. And he's directed clinical research for more than 32 years. He's been published in the most prestigious, peer-reviewed scientific journals. These include the Journal of the American Medical Association, the Lancet, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the New England Journal of Medicine, the American Journal of Cardiology, and the Lancet Oncology. Dr. Ornish's research showed that lifestyle changes affect gene expression, turning on disease-preventing genes and turning off genes that promote heart disease and cancer. He showed that lifestyle changes begin to reverse even severe coronary artery disease without drugs or surgery, a mind-blowing achievement as coronary artery disease is our number one killer. These lifestyle changes include a very low-fat diet, including predominantly fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and soy products in their natural, unrefined forms. Moderate exercise such as walking, various stress management techniques including yoga-based stretching, breathing, meditation, and imagery, and enhanced love and support, which may include support groups. In collaboration with Nobel laureate Elizabeth Blackburn, Dr. Ornish has showed that these lifestyle changes can lengthen telomeres, the ends of chromosomes that control how long we live. Medicare is covering his lifestyle program, the first time Medicare ever covered a program of this kind. And more private insurers are following suit. In fact, because of more widespread insurance coverage, hospitals like the UCLA Medical Center use the Ornish program as their intensive cardiac rehabilitation program. Dr. Ornish's program is very successful, but it begs the question, how much of heart disease reversal can be attributed to diet alone? Another great physician and researcher has helped to answer that question. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn Jr. has had quite an amazing career. Before becoming a physician, he won the Olympic gold medal in rowing in 1956 as a member of the victorious United States rowing team. He was trained as a surgeon at the prestigious Cleveland Clinic and at St. George's Hospital in London. In 1968, as an Army surgeon in Vietnam, he was awarded the Bronze Star. Dr. Esselstyn has been associated with the Cleveland Clinic since 1968. During that time, he has served as president of the staff and as a member of the Board of Governors. He chaired the clinic's breast cancer task force and headed its section of thyroid and parathyroid surgery. In 1991, Dr. Esselstyn served as president of the American Association of Endocrine Surgeons. And by 1991, Dr. Esselstyn was already an esteemed cancer and endocrine surgeon. However, it is not what he is most famous for. He's most famous for halting and reversing heart disease or coronary artery disease with diet. Dr. Esselstyn became interested in the research on heart disease because both he and his wife have poor family health histories. Dr. Esselstyn's father and father-in-law were both esteemed physicians in their own right. Unfortunately, they had another thing in common. They suffered and died prematurely from common chronic diseases. Between them, they had type 2 diabetes, strokes, prostate, colon, and lung cancers, and coronary artery disease. Although Dr. Esselstyn took great pride in his work as a surgeon, he became increasingly concerned about what he was not doing. Never curing the underlying disease, never doing anything to prevent it in the next victim. He was distressed at the general lack of interest among physicians in preventing chronic disease. He began looking at a great deal of epidemiological research, and he found that almost all chronic ailments, including coronary artery disease, were crowded into the Western countries. In many other countries, especially in Asia and Africa, those diseases hardly showed up at all. In 1995, Dr. Esselstyn published his benchmark long-term nutritional research arresting and reversing coronary artery disease in severely ill patients. What Dr. Esselstyn found was that by sticking to a low-fat, plant-based diet, patients with severe coronary artery problems were able to lower their blood cholesterol levels dramatically, from an average of 246 milligrams per deciliter to 137. Their arteries actually began to unclog, reversing the damage of heart disease. He conducted this study by gathering a group of 23 people with coronary disease who had suffered through 49 heart issues over the past 8 years. Those issues included angina pain, bypass surgery, heart attacks, strokes, and angioplasty. The study lasted 5 years, and Dr. Esselstyn met with his patients every 2 weeks to discuss their food diaries, record their blood pressure and weight, and take blood tests. And what did he find? Heart disease was halted and even reversed in 5 years. The diet was free of all added fats and almost all animal products. At first, participants were told to eat skim milk and non-fat yogurt, but a few years into the program, Dr. Esselstyn told them to remove milk and yogurt as well. Within the first 2 years of the study, 5 people dropped out, so 18 people remained. And of the remaining 18 people, 12 years after the study, only one had experienced a heart problem. And this person had strayed from the diet for 2 years, began experiencing chest pain, and then went back on the diet, which eliminated the chest pain. The same people who had gone through 49 coronary events before the study, now they had none. It's amazing, but it makes so much sense. A healthy plant-based diet is what humans thrive on, not all these crazy meat and dairy-based diets. X-rays showed actual signs of reversal in some patients. And beyond 20 years compliant, patients continued to thrive. And do you remember the 5 people who dropped out of the study? Do you know what happened to them in 10 years? They had 10 new heart issues in those 10 years. Although the results of this study were astounding, and they matched results found in studies by Dr. Ornish and the Pritikin Research Foundation, some skeptics complained that the sample size was too small. Small sample sizes often reduce the strength of a study, but not when the results are as dramatic as in this study. But Dr. Esselstyn decided to address the small sample size by conducting a larger study with 198 patients, and the results were published in June of 2014. This study included 198 patients. 177 out of the 198 adhered to the diet, a phenomenal 89% compliance rate. On this chart, TTC represents Dr. Esselstyn's treating the cause diet. And as you can see, TTC compares very favorably to 3 well-known interventions. The Lyon study is what put the Cretan Mediterranean diet on the map as the ideal diet to prevent and treat coronary artery disease. A 25% rate of recurrence was much better than the American Heart Association diet it was compared to, but 25% is still quite high. The natural history study included stent surgery, medical therapy with lipid lowering and antiplatelet and other medications. The COURAGE study included stent surgery, aggressive doses of lipid lowering and blood pressure medications. So the natural history and the COURAGE studies were aggressive interventions, each carrying risks of side effects associated with surgeries and medications. And the recurrence rates for each were slightly better than the Cretan Mediterranean diet in the Lyon study, but still quite high. Dr. Esselstyn's TTC study that included a low-fat, whole food plant-based diet blows these interventions out of the water. So now Dr. Esselstyn has 2 separate studies showing the amazing efficacy of his diet. In its 2015 position paper on vegetarian diets, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics referred to the Esselstyn and Ornish studies to support the AND's strong enthusiasm for the Ornish and Esselstyn diets in the treatment of coronary artery disease. A low-fat, whole food plant-based diet can reverse our number 1 killer. That alone should make it our default diet. But there is a lot of scientific research that shows that whole food plant-based diets can help prevent and treat other chronic diseases as well, including type 2 diabetes. Which brings us to Dr. Neil Barnard. Dr. Barnard is a clinical researcher, author, and health advocate. He's been the principal investigator or co-investigator on several clinical trials investigating the effects of diet on health. He founded the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, or PCRM, in 1985. PCRM has since grown into a nationwide group of physicians and lay supporters that promotes preventive medicine and addresses controversies in modern medicine. As president of PCRM, Dr. Barnard has been instrumental in efforts to reform federal dietary guidelines. In 2006, Dr. Barnard's researchers from George Washington University School of Medicine conducted a study that compared a low-fat vegan diet with the conventional American Diabetes Association diet. This vegan diet was a whole food plant-based diet that was 100% plant-based. This wasn't a junk food vegan diet. The study's authors concluded that this study shows that a low-fat vegan diet and a diet based on ADA nutrition recommendations can help people with type 2 diabetes control their blood glucose levels and lower their chances for heart and blood vessel problems. These improvements were greater with the low-fat vegan diet. You can find this quote right on the American Diabetes Association's website. A post-study survey showed that those following the low-fat, whole food plant-based diet found it easier to follow than followers of the ADA diet found the ADA diet to follow. This is significant as many physicians often argue that patients won't follow a whole food plant-based diet because it is too extreme. That wasn't the case in this study. In 2011, researchers at St. Charles University in Prague found similar results to Dr. Barnard. This study compared a vegetarian diet with the conventional type 2 diabetes diet. The vegetarian diet consisted of vegetables, grains, legumes, fruits, and nuts. Animal products were limited to a maximum of 1 portion of low-fat yogurt a day. This would certainly qualify as a whole food plant-based diet. And the results were very similar to the George Washington University study. After 24 weeks, 2 people out of the 37 people on the conventional diet were able to reduce their diabetes medications, but 16 people out of 37 on the vegetarian diet were able to reduce their meds. The group on the vegetarian diet outperformed the conventional group in the following areas: improved insulin sensitivity, greater reduction in visceral and subcutaneous fat, and improvement in oxidative stress markers. Very compelling results indeed. Now, the last researcher I'd like to profile is certainly not the least. In fact, it would be almost indecent to leave out T. Colin Campbell in any discussion of whole food plant-based diets. After all, he came up with the term whole food plant-based diet. Dr. Campbell is the Jacob Gould Sherman Professor Emeritus of Nutritional Biochemistry at Cornell University. For more than 40 years, Dr. Campbell has been at the forefront of nutrition research. He grew up on a dairy farm, and in his early studies, he expected to find diets high in animal protein were health-promoting. He found the exact opposite, over and over again. Dr. Campbell and the rest of his family members transitioned to a whole food plant-based diet based on his research. His career culminated with the China Project, which is the most comprehensive study of health and nutrition ever conducted. Prior to the China Project, Dr. Campbell's research, along with the research of others, established casein, a major dairy protein, as a potent tumor promoter. Experiments did not show the same effect when soy and wheat protein were used. The evidence shared by Dr. Campbell is quite convincing. Dr. Campbell concluded that consuming protein, particularly animal protein, in amounts above our needs, promotes cancer growth and other diseases. When animal protein exceeded 10% of total calories, cancer growth was promoted. The more it exceeded 10% of total calories, the more tumor growth was promoted. Dr. Campbell's first book, The China Study, Startling Implications for Diet, Weight Loss, and Long-Term Health, describes the evidence implicating animal products as disease promoters. It has sold over 1 million copies and is the foundation upon which a nationwide plant-based movement is based. And although the book's message has reached millions of people, along with the message promoted in the successful film Forks Over Knives, Dr. Campbell was perplexed about why global change was occurring so slowly. So 9 years after the China Study, he published his second book, Whole, Rethinking the Science of Nutrition, to explain what he thought was holding the whole food plant-based message back. One of the main reasons is the highly reductionist mindset that most researchers and dietitians have towards nutrition. A mindset that elevates unrelated facts at the expense of large, observable patterns. In essence, nutrition is equal to the sum of its parts. Dr. Campbell argues that this mindset does not take into account the amazing complexity of nutrition, and that we must take a whole is greater than the sum of its part approach to nutrition. We must stop seeing foods as single nutrients, meaning seeing dairy as a great calcium source, or oranges are high in vitamin C, or carrots are high in beta-carotene, or meat is a great protein source. We have to stop looking at nutrition this way. Single nutrients do not come close to representing a whole food, especially a whole plant food. A reductionist mindset towards nutrition does not help people discover the healthiest human diet. It just keeps us confused. I encourage you to read both of Dr. Campbell's books. You can also read my blog article on the plantasticlife.com website called Why Are We So Confused About Nutrition? Dr. Campbell's research on cancer is compelling. People fear cancer more than any disease, and rightly so. I'll talk more about diet and cancer in part 2 of this Recapture Your Health video series.